The 2021 judicial year opens with a call for Cameroonians to uphold the spirit of the law as guide to every action taken. The President of the Supreme Court and the Procurator General were speaking during the solemn ceremony in the presence of Prime Minister Joseph John Gote. The COVID-19 spread and children no longer spared. A visit to a specialized treatment center in Yaoundé reveals a drastic increase in the number of children cases undergoing treatment. How are the children responding? Find out in this edition. His Lordship Michael Bibi has been installed as the 5th bishop in the history of the Boya Diocese. The Archbishop of the Bamenda Metropolitan Diocese, His Grace Andrew Nkeya, prescribed teaching, sanctification and good governance to the new shepherd. And those are top stories. Good evening and thanks for joining us on the 7:30 News with me, Gladys Tata.
I urge you once again to put on your face masks, to wash your hands regularly, and to consult a physician or any other health personnel if you notice any symptoms. This is the only way to save lives and to curb the spread of the virus.
Cameroonians have been tasked to be law-abiding to ensure that the spirit of the law reigns for peace and social cohesion in the country. This was at the center of messages delivered today at the Supreme Court by the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court and the Procurator General. It was during the solemn reopening of the 2021 judicial year, attended amongst others by the Prime Minister Joseph John Gote. Charles Ebune has more.
To mark this year's Supreme Court reopening, by extension, the legal family. One by the Procurator General of the Supreme Court, Luke Jodo, which dwelt on the search of civic responsibility of Cameroonians regarding public property as he denounced on Cameroonian values like terrorism, homosexuality, and the blatant disrespect of the rules and regulations in force, especially by criminal cyber warlords. In a bid to protect public funds, the state is updating the criminal law to meet modern exigencies. It has introduced specific laws to match up with the penal code, which the man on the street has named Operation Sparrowhawk. The other discourse was delivered by the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, Daniel Mekobesone, who dwelt on the difficult equation of executing decisions taken by the Justice Department, and this weakens the spirit of the law, he outlined. Any judicial activity has three phases: the hearing, the judgment, and the execution of the judgment, and the latter is the most important. This was the first judicial year reopening ceremony after the major appointments in the judiciary last year and held within the COVID-19 context in the presence of the entire legal family and the government headed by Prime Minister, Head of Government, Joseph Dion Gote.
Important communication on the phenomenon of terrorism was made by both speakers of the Supreme Court, Chief Justice Daniel Mekobesone and the Procurator General Luke Jodo, during the solemn opening of the 2021 judicial year at the Supreme Court today. Sidonie Jopmandi revisits the messages made during the event. Her report.
Criminal acts such as kidnapping for ransom and the killing of individuals in some part of the country were the main issues among many others highlighted during the 2021 solemn reopening session of the judicial year. Subjects of reflection such as drug abuse, theft, corruption, and embezzlement were also elaborated in submissions presented to the public by the Procurator General of the Supreme Court. When raising this important information to members of governments and authorities of the Judicial Corps, the Procurator General Luke Jodo came up with possible solutions which can help in reducing vandalism in the country. Unlike previous years, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, Daniel Meko-Besone, presented in his address vital information on obstacles in the execution of court judgments. The Chief Justice of the Supreme Court also urged the Sheriff Bailiff Corps to wake up and conduct self-criticism when executing their duty. Stakeholders and authorities of different jurisdictions were also called to turn a new page in the execution of court judgments in Cameroon.
Strategies to promote local development within the context of decentralization in Cameroon have come under scrutiny today in Yaoundé. This was during the cabinet meeting for the month of February, which Prime Minister Joseph John Goute chaired this afternoon. The session also focused on reforms of the forestry subsector and the evolution of the COVID-19 pandemic in the country. Star Building correspondent Christian Che Atam has the details.
Decentralization will become more intense with the setting up of regions in Cameroon. It is important to make sure that regional councils will effectively boost regional development on the field. This cabinet meeting examined strategies to make regional councils more performant. Careful planning, financial autonomy, and the training of personnel are the main strategies under execution.
We also have to organize the local finances the way the state is doing, particularly the implementing of the budget program.
In January 2022, the exportation of untreated timber from the Central African sub-region could be suspended. The cabinet meeting also examined strategies of making the forestry subsector productive nonetheless.
We had to suggest some reforms concerning the funding of our activities. Concerning the wildlife school and forestry school of Mbalmayo, we have suggested some reforms in order to move from 2 years training to 3 years in order to have engineer of forestry and engineer of wildlife.
The session further reviewed latest trends on the COVID-19 pandemic in Cameroon.
Our situation now is not alarming, but is worrying enough to take measures.
Prime Minister Joseph John Goute has called for concerted actions to strengthen the forestry subsector, make decentralization effective on the field, and prevent a re-escalation of COVID-19.
And we just have this press release coming into the studio, and it reads, due to the constraints and restrictions to prevent the coronavirus pandemic, the head of state, Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces, has authorized the minister delegate at the presidency in charge of defense to exceptionally organize in a reduced military format a ceremony parade to award epaulets to officer cadets constituting the 38th batch of the Combined Services Military Academy, EMIA, who have come to the end of their training. The batch is christened Peace and Unity. And this ceremony will be immediately followed by their deployment to positions corresponding to their rank. The ceremony is scheduled for Friday, 26th of February 2021, as from 11 a.m. prompt at the EMIA campus, and it shall be presided by the Lieutenant General Chief of Defense Staff and in strict compliance with the anti-COVID-19 measures. It is worth underscoring that in the absence of the head of state and the state dignitaries at this ceremony, due to the prevailing health context, does not in any way undermine the usual solemnity of graduation ceremonies of officer cadets at the end of their training at EMIA. The head of state, Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces, will again honor this long-standing tradition once the health conditions of the country shall permit. Lastly, the minister delegate at the presidency in charge of defense highlights the batch in honor this Friday, 26 February 2021, is composed of officer cadets from 6 countries: Cameroon, Congo, Brazzaville, Cote d'Ivoire, Gabon, Guinea Conakry, and the Central African Republic. And it has been signed by the minister delegate at the presidency in charge of defense, Joseph Betty Assomo. The number of coronavirus cases in Cameroon has risen drastically in the past couple of weeks, with children being identified among critical cases, growing evidence that children, just like adults, are not exempted from the severity of the disease. Beatrice Losamba visited a specialized treatment center for COVID-19 here in the nation's capital, where about 50 children have been hospitalized, to see just how they are getting on in the center. Here's what she brought back for this edition of the news.
Here is proof that there are kids critically ill of COVID-19, contrary to popular beliefs that only adults manifest serious symptoms. The specialized treatment center in Yaoundé hosts over 50 of them, some as young as only 6 months.
The patients that are hospitalized in our pediatric ward wounds come with respiratory distress, fever, cough. They will come with like some discrete symptoms like gastrointestinal disorders, vomiting and diarrhea, skin manifestations.
The Orca Treatment Center wears an expert look as it deals carefully with this delicate age group, adapting care and treatment to their specific needs.
We still use hydroxychloroquine and azithromycin, and these drugs are given to the children based on their weight.
To keep their moods high up there, the children are allowed to have their mothers by their side and are given psychological support tailored for their state of mind. We are always at their bedside to provide warmth and be a second mother to them, she says. Across the country, more cases of children with COVID-19 are reported, just like adults, growing evidence that children can catch and transmit COVID-19 at similar rates to adults.
COVID-19 is wreaking havoc as Cameroon witnessed the second wave of the virus, of the pandemic. Medical practitioners now have the pressing duty to protect their health and that of their patients. Is in CRTV Douala and talked to the regional delegate of public health for the littoral region, who now gives the level of preparedness in that region. Her report.
Cameroon is already hit by the second wave of the COVID-19 pandemic, and it is a question for health practitioners who are at the forefront in fighting the pandemic to be more alert and cautious of the situation to properly handle the cases that might come their way. This, according to the Littoral Regional Delegate for Public Health, measures have been provided for them to tackle the situation.
We are working on increasing our effort in the point of entry of the country. We are working on having more beds than what we have now. We are also working on the labs so that we have more capacity of testing people.
To better handle the situation, health facilities have been provided with materials for this purpose, as they will in the days ahead screen a good number of persons. The isolation center at Hiasa is equally being prepared to accommodate and cater for both severe and normal cases. The disinfection of hospitals and other public places are equally a necessity to avoid a vast spread of the virus.
Parents in Kolofata, the subdivision that has suffered the most from Boko Haram, have been enjoined to convince their children who are in the sect to drop their arms and join the DDR center in the far north. This was the key message from the senior divisional officer for Mayo Sava, Roger Safo, who, while presiding over a working session in Kolofata to reinforce security. Present were defense and security forces, members of vigilante groups, traditional and municipal authorities, as we hear in the following report with CRTV's Far North correspondent, Henry Tato Ekambi.
Implanted in the Far North region since 2015 at the peak of the Boko Haram insurgency, which has caused untold migration within the Lake Chad Basin, the National Organization for Migration has been a key partner of the Cameroon government in the stabilization of populations.
Rehabilitation, mental support, and displacement tracking, or beneficiaries as we call them.
Meanwhile, during a meeting with Governor Mijawa Bakari, the UN Migration Agency scribe lauded the initiative by President Paul Biya to create the National Disarmament, Demobilization and Reintegration Commission and promised the collaboration of her agency.
We have a number of programs, one of which being the DDRR program, the DTM, which is the Displacement Tracking Matrix, mental and psychosocial support. And all of this combined is geared towards identifying the needs to ensure proper capacity building, reintegration.
Similar engagements have been taken by Maureen Maggie, Regional Director of the Norwegian Refugee Council for Central and West Africa.
Our dossier from the regions tonight takes us to the south, where recurrent massive bushfires sparked by traditional farming techniques have devastated from farmlands in some parts of the Villa division in recent weeks. Though no lives have been lost, farmlands and cocoa plantations have, however, been consumed by the flames, and also electric poles and cables along at the base of the Electricity Development Corporation near Ebolova raised by this wildfire. Clarence Aze reports on the bushfire phenomenon in the South region.
Scars of the bushfire which ravaged parts of the slopes of Mount Ebolova last week are still evident. Residents of the area at the New Bell neighborhood say the flames were so fierce that they thought could engulf their homes.
The fire came from the other neighborhood. A child is said to have lit the fire after clearing the surroundings of their toilet. It burnt across due to the heavy winds and ravaged the entire hill.
The bushfire also dealt a huge blow on cocoa farmers in Mangong subdivision. 40 hectares of plantations of the cash crop went in flames, leaving farmers helpless. In this other locality on the outskirts of Ebolova, where the Electricity Development Corporation, EDC, has one of its bays, cables, electric poles and other valuable equipment were ravished.
This fire has burnt across 2 kilometers, destroying many farms. We tried putting out the flames some 500 meters from this base, but it didn't work.
The bushfires have been blamed on poor farming techniques practiced by farmers as they prepare their farms ahead of the planting season. Administrative authorities are taking necessary measures to quench the consuming flames and sensitizing farmers to stop igniting more.
Following this recurrent bushfire in Ebolova and its environs, South Regional authorities have called on the population to alert the fire brigade in case of any fire outbreak. Our South Regional correspondent, Pontianos Lawong, looks at some of the causes of bushfire and measures taken to prevent such a phenomenon. His report.
Barely weeks to the start of the 2021 farming season in the South region, farmers are busy preparing their farms. However, unhealthy farming methods, notably slash and burn, have in most cases caused wildfires with tens of hectares of plantations consumed, leaving farmers dispirited.
What we are doing now is to sensitize the population that they should avoid putting fire near the city. And if they are obliged to do so because they have some activity, farming activity to perform, they should make sure that they are able to control the fire.
As competent officials sensitized in favor of a mentality switch, the firefighting brigade has mobilized human and material resources to immediately intervene should the need arises, but are faced with a number of difficulties.
Le feu de Nouvelle. Let's take the case of the New Bear fire incident. The fire was on the slopes of the mountain, about 10 meters high, and we couldn't reach there with water. Since there were many houses around, we had to clear a fire path around so as to control it growing wider. In addition, we have just one recognized water source in Ebolova that is situated around Bengo Hotel.
The dry season is harsh in the equatorial rainforest, and apart from non-conventional farming methods, other human activities, experts say, could also favor bushfires. For example, throwing cigarette stumps carelessly could also have disastrous consequences.
Committee members of the Integrated Planning and Development Program JA Mining Loop and the adjacent border area PATYCHOU have resolved to ensure the rehabilitation of road networks affected by the McKean Hydroelectric Dam project. This is one of the decisions taken during the 11th and 12th sessions of orientations and supervisions organized during the patronage, under the patronage of the Minister of the Economy, Planning and Regional Development, Alamin Usman May. Ewane Epole is a man on that beat.
The Integrated Planning and Development Program for the JA Mining Loop and the adjacent border area, PATYCHOU, has as main objective to improve the living conditions of populations and promote cross-border trade through the development and construction of socio-economic infrastructures and institutional support in the southern and eastern regions. During the 11th and 12th sessions of the Orientation and Supervision Committee holding in Yaoundé, under the patronage of the Minister of Economy, Planning and Regional Development, the sum of 2.3 billion civil francs was adopted as budget to finance development projects in the municipalities in 2021.
We are operating on the field for about 3 years now, and we have already constructed boreholes and pipe-borne water.
Committee members of the PATYCHOU project are also expected to rehabilitate the road network affected by the Benkim hydroelectric dam while pursuing activities launched in the previous years.
The Minister of the Economy, Planning and Regional Development has received in audience the Ambassador of the Republic of Tunisia to Cameroon. During the audience, His Excellency Karim Ben Bedoui outlined projects to be undertaken in the country within the framework of bilateral ties between Tunisia and Cameroon. Here is Minister Alamin Usman May in an interview granted by CRTV.
We want to emphasize on the promotion of the private sector development, taking advantage of the experience from Tunisia, bringing together investors, mobilizing the resources necessary to support the policy of our country to become an emerging country by 2030. Is also in the National Development Strategy 2020-2030 with the pillar of structural transformation of our economy for inclusive development, towards taking advantage of the African continental free trade area that will open up the market at the continent level.
Despite our efforts, COVID-19 plunged many families into mourning and seriously hampered the functioning of our economy and society.
There is so much talk about vaccine for COVID-19 presently, with some Cameroonians eager to know when the vaccine will be introduced in the country. Baldwin Sama is with his guest, Dr. Joseph Fokam, to shed light on the procedure guiding the decision of a possible vaccine in the country. Hi, Baldwin.
Actually, Gladys, I should say it has been a talking point in Cameroon ever since we had the outbreak of the coronavirus, a talking point on the possibility of having a vaccine as far as limiting the spread of the coronavirus is concerned. But actually, in Cameroon, where are we so far with the much talked about vaccine? Let's find out from our guest, Dr. Joseph Fokam, who is a virologist. Good evening to you, Doctor.
Good evening, Baldwin.
Many Cameroonians are so eager to know where are we so far with this much talked about vaccine as one of the solutions to this deadly virus, the coronavirus.
Yes, absolutely, Baldwin. Actually, vaccine is one of the major preventive tools against COVID-19. It is true in Europe and in America, vaccination actually is going on massively. In Cameroon also, the Scientific Council is already on board to discuss the feasibility and the effectiveness of vaccine in our context. So one of the two major issues we are considering in Cameroon is, for example, the COVID-19 virus strain in our context. So far, we know we don't yet have a new evidence of the new variants of COVID-19 within Cameroon. And because of this, probably all the available vaccines also may work in our context. But now, taking also into account logistics, some of these vaccines requires -70 degrees, so which is quite difficult in our context. So we will surely be going towards vaccine that may be also within our room temperature, and secondly also that may cover our circulating strain within our context. And we are sure in the upcoming weeks Cameroon is going to give out his own choice among those pile of vaccine existing around the world.
Thank you so much, Doctor, for all those explanations. Cameroonians will have to be quite patient as to a solution to this coronavirus pandemic. Talking about the vaccine, because the government has the concern of the population at heart, and only the best will be dished out to the population. Back to you, Gladys Tete.
Good night, Baldwin, and thanks. The Archbishop of the Bamenda Metropolitan Diocese has prescribed teaching, sanctification and good governance as watchwords to the Bishop of Boya, His Lordship Michael Bibi, for him to succeed as shepherd of the Boya Diocese. His Grace Andrew Nkea was speaking during canonical procession and installation of the Reverend Michael Bibi as the 5th residential bishop of the oldest diocese in Cameroon. The ceremony, which took place at the Divine Mercy Co-Cathedral site in the Southwest region, was also attended by the President's representative, the Secretary General of the Presidency, Elum Porche, amongst others. Enangamenyoli reports from CRTV Boya.
The ceremony began with a procession of the bishops and priests, as well as the Apostolic Nuncio to Cameroon and Equatorial Guinea, His Excellency Monsignor Julio Moratz. During the installation proper that preceded the Holy Mass, the Apostolic Nuncio to Cameroon and Equatorial Guinea read the Bull of Appointment and later handed over the crucier or staff to the new shepherd of the Diocese of Boya as a symbol of power to direct his flocks. After being escorted to his seat, the bishops and priests present paid allegiance to the new bishop of Boya as a sign of recognition as the new shepherd of the diocese. To the priests and Christians of the Boya Diocese, Bishop Nkea exhorted them to love, obey, and respect their new bishop.
We are going to put our heads together to see how we can continue to work together as a family in order to improve on our spiritual lives, on our pastoral ministry, and to see how we can get good accommodations for our churches and our priests.
Born in 1971, Bishop Bibi was admitted into the St. Thomas Aquinas Major Seminary, Bambui, and ordained in April 2000. And on the 5th of January 2021, Pope Francis appointed him as the 5th residential bishop of the oldest diocese in Cameroon.
The level of execution of ongoing projects in the Ocean Division of the South Region has been assessed by the Senior Divisional Officer, Nohu Bello. The SDO, who has undertaken his maiden socio-economic tour of the division following his commissioning into office, used the occasion to call on youth to engage in acts of creativity and desist from unholy behavior. Alice May completes the story in the following report.
The divisional officer made his first stop at Govayang, where he inspected the palm plantation of about 10 hectares. His next stop was at Bikoka, where he exchanged with the cocoa and rubber estate producers.
There are a lot of projects, agro-pastoral projects, and I congratulate and encourage the elites who done the project. And I ask the youths to go on and to take this example.
We are facilitating the things so that the work goes on smoothly. We are sensitizing the population along the road to not develop hostilities towards the workers.
His next port of call was at the Lolodov Kribi Access, after which he had discussions with fish farmers.
I decided to do fish farming in order to satisfy my ambitions.
The administrative officer rounded off his visit with a call for the population to work towards promoting social cohesion and peace.
L'Ambitieuse is the brainchild of CRTV's Rachel Malongo. While presenting the book this Thursday in Yaoundé in the presence of colleagues, she explained how some women use malicious means to achieve their selfish ambitions. The author equally used the occasion to discourage the practice of witchcraft. The lessons to learn, according to her, are many and must be taken very seriously to avoid the temptation of being caught in the dragnet and embarrassment. In sports, Cameroon's under-20 national football team have been eliminated from the 2021 Africa Cup of Nations of their category in Mauritania. The team lost to the Satellites of Ghana 2-4 after post-penalty shootouts. The selections had earlier on played a 0-0 draw at regular time, then a 1-1 draw at prolongations. Ghana have hence qualified for the semis of the tournament. And the fourth session of the pilot committee of the rural we shall not be having that report. And it is here we draw the curtains on this edition of the 7:30. Join Adele Mbala at 8:30 for the news in French. I'll be back next week. A new team takes over from tomorrow. Good night.
I urge you once again to put on your face masks, to wash your hands regularly, and to consult a physician or any other health personnel if you notice any symptoms. This is the only way to save lives, to curb the spread of the virus.
CRTV News, ici, toute l'info.